Welcome everybody to our first edition of EdBites by MRCC. Today we are having Sanjee and Emma from Sweet Cherry Publishing, and today we are going to talk about the accessibility and inclusivity in the children literature. So welcome to the episode, Sanjee and Emma. How are you doing today?
Really good. Thank you for having us.
Yep, very good.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Before we get started, we would love to know a little bit more about you guys, a little bit history of the Sweet Cherry and how it started, everything. If you can let us know.
Of course. So, Sweet Cherry is 12 years old. We're an independent publisher based in the middle of England, a lovely little place called Leicester. And what we're most famous for is this is not where publishing happens. So it's really important that that actually informs a lot of our success because what we do here is always different because we're not informed or overlooked by the publishing which generally happens in bigger cities like London. So it just means that we can get away with doing whatever we want. Nobody looks at us. And we're just really lucky that serving the community here in Leicester, which is a largely immigrant population, has served us really well because the books that we publish have become popular all over the world. So we count ourselves really lucky. We've got a few awards under our belt. Um, so yeah, we're really proud of what we've achieved. But what we have done is not really followed a regular publishing strategy. We've done something very different, and that difference is what people recognize and celebrate.
And every cherry is a unique story, I would say, of how it was created, but it definitely feeds through to everything that Sanji just said about Sweet Cherry Publishing. So every cherry came from the fact that I used to work in special needs schools, and I noticed that there was a very big lack of literature for people with disabilities and people who had what we've called barriers to reading. So that might be font, font size, it might be too many words on a page, it could be the narrative itself needing to be a bit simpler. And cutting a long story short, Sanji realised that my experience wasn't just my own, it was true for everybody working in special needs schools, but people in general across the UK and the world. So Sanji and Abdul, who's the director of both Every Cherry and Sweet Cherry, gave me the opportunity to see what we could create. And here we are.
Yes.
So we published our first titles in May in different formats. And we've now published one of each different format in Every Cherry to make books as accessible as possible. And we continue to strive to make literature as accessible as possible, following Sweet Cherry's lead.
So when we started Sweet Cherry, accessibility was really important to us. So our research with our immediate population around where we work from, our head office, was that our demographic didn't often have an opportunity to go to shops. So therefore, we made it the box set model. So we made all our books in like 10 plus box sets. So we supplied a mini library for every parent who wasn't able to access shops. We made it affordable, which is the second thing that we found that our community here in Leicester couldn't always afford books. So we made that by bunching 10 books together. This is not me, this is Abdul. Came up with the idea of making this mini library affordable. The other thing that we noticed in our community that English wasn't always the first language because, like I said, it's a largely immigrant population. So the children often only heard English at school, not at home. So we didn't have that the benefit of having parents read to their children at home. So we always supplied a free QR code with our books so that each child could have the gift of having a book read out loud at home. So those are the few things that we did that made our books accessible and different to what was already on the market. But it was always with our own community that we were really trying to service when we came up with these solutions. When Emma came, she told us about other things that we could do. And so accessibility has always driven and informed our publishing list and what we put out. And Emma just gave us another thing that we hadn't ever considered before that we could do, so we could publish. Obviously, now that we're on the other side, we realize we are the only people that actually do that. But that was a complete happenstance and accident, because we were really following Emma's lead when she said this community also needs access to books. So accessibility is a huge part of our DNA.
Great. Uh, well, thank you so much for answering that and letting people know about Sweet Cherry and Every Cherry. And now we'll begin with our questions, and we'll start with the first one from the COVID period. So, as we know, there's a huge shift before the COVID and after the COVID period. So, how did you guys manage those shift, and what you guys did?
BC and AC, before COVID and after COVID. So before COVID, we were actually on a really nice trajectory, and a lot of similar sized companies, I will tell you, folded during COVID. And again, it's because we're owned by an Indian, and I don't know if you know anything about Indians, but we buy in bulk. It's very important. So what happened with us is during COVID, we actually thrived because we had a warehouse full of books, and we were in this super fortunate position that parents were at home twiddling their thumbs, wondering what to do with their children, and sick of their children having too much screen time. So they reached out to publishers like us who had plenty of stock and no ships, caught at sea, to provide them with books. And that's where we really did well, and we doubled our business over COVID. So COVID was great for us. After COVID, it's been a similar trajectory. It's done really, really well. It's started to plateau out now, but that's like a good few years after that we found that actually, I'm going to be honest, COVID was great for the publishing industry because it reignited, the world's love for books, which is exactly what we needed, because before COVID, it was unfortunately declining and decreasing. So our job is to keep that entertainment level up, the interest level up, and keep, kids reading and introduce new kids to reading. Good.
I think from an every cherry in COVID situation, every
Mm.
cherry what didn't really exist during COVID. But one thing I did find as a teacher in COVID is it actually made people with disabilities a lot more isolated. And it still is the case now. So a lot of people with a disability had anxiety about change and being out of their comfort zone. And because home became their comfort zone, moving out of it and getting back into the school routine again became something that people were quite scared of, really. So before I started here, and still now, we have quite a lot of people contact us and say that their child is out of school because they have anxiety about going back to school since COVID. So one thing that Every Cherry tries to do is make reading accessible, but we also provide the free teaching and learning resources on our website, which then makes teaching and learning accessible for homeschoolers and for teachers that might need a little bit of help in accessing the children that might not be in school but still want to learn. So I think for the disability community, COVID had a big hit, and actually it did isolate the community more, and it's trying to find ways to reach that community in their safe environment and give them the confidence to move out and back into what is their new norm. So I would say that Every Cherry does strive to try and help those people and make sure that teachers know we're here, so that parents have that bank of resources, so that young people feel like they can still access learning and texts that are really meaningful to them.
Great. Thank you for answering that. And as we know, there are many children publishers outside. And how do you see Sweet Cherry and Every Cherry is different from them?
We're 100% different.
Great question.
So when I got started here, one of the things that I didn't want to do is, cannibalize an already thriving industry. I didn't understand this concept. So often there is a temptation to chase the money. So, for example, if a certain subject matter, let's use unicorns, for example, are really popular, I didn't understand why I would want to make a unicorn book. I feel like everybody can eat at the unicorn table. I'd make a dragon's book. And that is kind of the nucleus of where our thinking is. We always want to be different. So I'm famous for also saying I never want to cut down a perfectly good tree that's been up for 100 years, just so that one of my books can gather dust. Like, I don't want that. I want my books to not only be accessible, but to be useful and to be, useful every day, and for every child to feel that magic that we all felt when we read books when we were children. So I think the way we handle ourselves is really, we're really conscientious. And I don't mean we as in me and Emma, because we are conscientious, but we can speak for the whole of our team and assure you that everybody who works with us behind the scenes to make these books happen are as conscientious and as passionate as us. Sometimes maybe even more.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah.
And that's what makes us different. We're all here on a mission to achieve one thing, and that is accessibility. That is to get new readers to books, to create new appreciations, to create connections with books and a child, books and a parent. Um, and I think that informs everything we do every day.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. And one thing I noticed, so obviously Sanjee's been in the publishing sector a lot longer than me, but I attended London Book Fair. I think it was in 2023 for the first time, and I'd only just started working at Sweet Cherry for about 2 months. So when I went to London Book Fair first time, it was amazing. But I thought, you know what, this is my opportunity to find out what the publishing world does. Let me go and have a look and do a bit of research. So I tried to find what I thought would be every Cherry's competition. And London Book Fair, you have the whole publishing world all flock to London. And I found one stand for books for people with disabilities to be able to access books, and that was through Braille. So books for people who are blind or visually impaired. And then when I looked around, I realised that actually there is a huge gap in the market that needed to be filled for people with disabilities, or people that may not read the conventional way. So people that might not read through phonics, for example. There's other ways to learn to read, which every cherry embraces. So it embraces phonics reading, but it also embraces sight reading and reading through pictures, and putting all of these things together so that the tools that a young person has learnt they can utilize, but they can also utilize their best way of reading. So I hope that that's what makes Sweet Cherry unique, so that the next time we're at London Book Fair, if there are people that are looking for accessible books, there'll be more than one stand. And
That's our ambition.
That's how we can
We consider,
stand
you
out.
asked how are we different to other
Yeah.
publishers. We like to consider ourselves leaders, and every cherry is a real example, tangible example how we are leaders in the market. We are not at all followers. Yeah. Well, you're not the first, so that's a great thing. We find this a huge challenge when we go out into the outside world, because we live in this cute
Yeah.
little comfort zone of what we know exactly what we want to achieve. But Emma and I have the privilege of going around the world, and often we're quite
Surprised.
flummoxed
Yeah.
by the fact that people don't see the world quite as we do. And they're very reserved and conservative and traditional, but it's our jobs to inform. So actually, we end up changing a lot of people's minds
Yeah,
and opening
definitely.
their eyes to something brand new. And that's what accessibility is. It's just, bringing into some, and myself included, when Emma walked in and showed me what we needed to do, I have to put my hands up, and I didn't realize we hadn't been serving this community. And that their need was different to what I was publishing. So really, she called me out, and we obviously had to fix it. And this is kind of what I get to do now with other people. Obviously, it's a bit difficult because we are leaders, so it's hard to change a buyer's mind and go, this is something you need to stock, when they have had nothing previously to show any success. But our passion goes forward, and they're willing to give it a go, and that's where we are very lucky and we're very different.
Yeah. I also think as well, it's, oh, are you still there? Sorry, you'd frozen a minute. You're still there. Yeah. Um, yeah, I think as well, it's about understanding what readers need and like. So once you know what that reader needs, you can then formulate a way to reach that reader. So obviously I was a teacher, but as a parent and as somebody that knows that there is a big group of people out there that really, really, really want to read books, the classic books, for example, like Moby Dick, Frankenstein, all of these things, but they just can't access them because, to be honest, they are really quite difficult books. I gave up on Moby Dick. Um, so it doesn't what we're trying to do is open the avenues for people to access books. And what I have told quite a lot of people is that it seems like there's quite a small niche community that need these books, but the more and more I learn about the world that we're living in and every cherry, is that that niche isn't as small as I thought it was. I think you said this to me once as well when we very first met, that if you really think about it, in most families there is somebody with some form of disability or some form of barrier to being able to open that book. And what we're trying to do is break down those barriers. But really, if one person in every family across the world has this, then we can be far reaching. But again, I'm not sure about the statistics where you are, but where we are, the diagnosis are going up and up and up, to the point where there was a news article that was out last week that for an adult to get diagnosed with ADHD, it's an 8-year wait, and that the diagnosis for anybody with a learning disability has gone up from, I think it was 750,000 to 1.2 million in the past year. So eyes are being opened, and we hope that every cherry can bridge that gap and help lead the way into making lives easier for people that really do want to read and that might just need to be part of a community where they feel safe and feel welcomed and part of it.
And the thing is, that's the main thing. We always go back to the reader first. And I think that makes us different from other publishers who may go, oh, we're only doing this because it's commercial, or we do this because this is the type of book we read. We are very different, where we say, what does the modern reader want? What does the future reader want? What do they need? Let's go fill that gap. And that's what we do.
Perfect, perfect. And as we know that you're headquartered in London, and so we would like to know, no, you're not?
We're not. We started this conversation by explaining that we're as far away from London as one person can possibly get. The reason is we're in Leicester, and we said that we wouldn't really be able to achieve what we have achieved if we lived in London, because London's publishing is kind of, I would say, quite similar. They're eating from the same pot. It's very different. What we did was our founder created us because he wanted to fill the gaps that he fell through. So he himself is the youngest of an immigrant family. He was never really introduced to books or read to. He only had books at school. So he didn't want his own children to fall through the same cracks as he did. So that's really why we existed. He was filling a need for himself and the community around him. And that's what's always informed us. Emma coming in with Every Cherry was also to fill in the gaps in the community that we both live in. So that's why we would have had a much different story if we lived in London. And so therefore we're proud to say we don't live in London.
Sure, and the reason why I asked you that, because we wanted to know which geographical region you are catering right now, and what are your plans for moving out and like exploring new territories, new market.
So we're really lucky. Believe it or not, what these children need here in Leicester is what they need all over the world. Who knew? So, for example, when we go to India or Asia, they really prioritize the importance of English and they really welcome our books because we make English accessible to them. And they're like, this is brilliant. What, it comes with a free QR code where I can hear, an English voice read the story so I can work on my pronunciation. That is fantastic for them. Obviously, you and I both know the reason why we put this in was so that our children in Leicester could hear an English voice reading to them. But in foreign climes, they feel this is put in specially for them for their own particular reasons. And honestly, it's rather than luck than by any kind of strategy. But it's worked and resonated with people all over the world. We went to America and they love what we do there. And they say, is there any chance we can have it in American Spanish? And we're like, oh my God, that's amazing. So, we get this all over the world where we're received so well. But there isn't really anywhere that I can think of where our books don't exist in a new territory. So we recruited an author. Their books is it's a work collaboration work, and I remember one of them saying, "Oh my God, you guys are a really legitimate publisher." And I said, "Excuse me." Interesting statement. No, they said like really because my cousins live in New Zealand and they were able to get the book, and I was like, of course. But people don't expect a little independent publisher from the middle of England in Leicester to have the kind of reach that we have.
I'm sure. I'm sure. And I could see that passion, that love for the publishing, the children publishing in both of your eyes. That takes me to my next question. How about, are you kind of supported from any of the government schemes in UK?
No, we're not supported at the moment, but what we would like to do with Every Cherry is because Every Cherry is, like we said, it's quite pioneering in the publishing world. So it's one of the, well, it is the only publishing house that are publishing symbolized books and accessible books, but the symbolized ones especially. So for those listeners that don't know, they are small images that sit above the keywords in a sentence, which make reading easier.
So it's like an indicator. For example, if the word home or house is there, oh, home is there, there'll be a little picture of a house above the word home. So a person reading it would be like, oh, home. I get it.
Yeah.
Um,
So it's a visual clue. So the young person can use their phonics knowledge to decode the word of home. But if they struggle with that, which is often the case, they can look at the image and it gives them that clue.
exactly. The only way I can do it is if you were like me and you cheated at reading. I used to read the picture when I was too lazy to read the words when I was a child, when my parents were trying to watch me read. I don't know if you did this. So this is like the modern day equivalent, but
Oh yeah, Jack does this all the time.
using it to your advantage to get the child actually to engage with the book and read it.
Yeah, exactly. Um, I have now lost them. Oh yeah,
Sorry.
it was the whether we work with any government
Mm.
organisations. What we are in the process of doing is trying to come up with a reading scheme for symbol users that we can then approach the government with and say, this scheme is supported by all of the teaching and learning resources that we already have. It's supported by our in-house symbol software. We have other companies that we work with. We have speech and language therapists now that works alongside us and make sure that everything that we're creating is right. And we're hoping, my personal aim is to have a reading scheme for symbols that teachers can come to, parents, learners, and we can assess their cognition, understanding of all the symbols, and they can eventually use those symbols to create their own sentences, build their communication skills, and excel in a way that best suits them. And I think in, I mean, I don't want to sound our own trumpet, but I really do think that there is something in that, because in this country there isn't anything out there on that scale. It's all very much, we teach reading in this way and that's phonics, but actually we need an alternative. So that's what we're aiming for. We're aiming to create a reading scheme and a reading curriculum based on symbols.
Well, what we know from, I'm sure human history is that governments don't always have the resources or the inclination to support projects such as this. So regardless, we would always go ahead and make things. And this is
Yeah.
something that I think like we should talk about as a society, saying we can't expect the people in charge to make a change, and we see more and more of it now. We are the change that we want to see in the world, and in publishing, certainly, Sweet Cherry and Every Cherry is the change that we think should be in the world, and it's being received like that. So we don't rely on any government to fund us, we fund ourselves. um, and we rely on buyers and customers understanding what we're doing and why there's a need, and that only informs our success. But unfortunately, there isn't really any government funding or handouts, which is really difficult to absorb, because we are lucky to travel around the world, and we see the amount of funding that is available for other publishers around the world. But unfortunately, we live in a country where very recently, parents were taking their local councils to court for not having resources, such as the resources that Emma has put together for Every Cherry, for the children who really need it. So I can't go to the government and say, can you give me money, when I know that there are actually kids out there who aren't getting books at all. And that's why we are sort of that little solution, for parents who, may want to help their kids, but don't know how or how to go about it. And that's why we make it affordable and accessible, so that every parent or teacher can get their hands on these books.
But it is working. So
Hmm.
this morning I received an email from a mum who had said that her son has been out of school for 2 years because he was awaiting a diagnosis and the school weren't able to support him. But for him to be able to move into specialist provision, he needed a diagnosis. So it's that grey area of waiting for the diagnosis, finding the right place for him. But they came across our books, and he loves to read, but he's dyslexic and has different learning disabilities, but found that these symbolized books were what really resonated with him. And she'd emailed and said, where can I get more? I want more of these books. How can you help? Like, is there anything else
You
out
better
there?
get making. Oh my
Yeah,
gosh.
so I sent her the website. I
Sounds like an
sent
order,
lots of
Emma.
titles. No, I know
You
it
should
was
go
an
on it.
order. I was on it. I replied straight away. But then they thanked me and said no, thank you. And that's what we have had a lot. Even in America, people would walk past and just say thank you, and that was it. And then, it's one of those things where I actually think there's been a need for this for a long time, but Sweet Cherry had the guts to go with it and really grab it by its horns, and here
Yeah.
we are helping the people that
No,
we're
the
meant to.
ignorance. We had the ignorance to go with it, because
Yeah.
we always say at Sweet Cherry, ignorance is bliss. So we didn't
Yes.
know. We don't know. So we just go, oh yeah, let's do that. Sounds like fun. Like, we don't think, oh wait, can anybody sell this book? Does it work? Who needs, like, we're just like, we should do this book. This book looks like it needed. No one is more surprised than my boss to find out, oh my God, that it's actually selling. Because for him, he's like, you guys, because we are very much his passion project. He has a really successful business, and he's doing this, as I said, for the altruistic reason that he didn't want his children to fall through the same crack. So it's like we're his community service program.
But I also think as well, because I came from education, I
Mm.
had an ignorance is bliss and still almost do in the publishing world. So together,
We're
we're
dangerous, because
either,
that's the other
yeah,
secret to Sweet Cherry. You said about, what is the difference between you and other publishers? None of us are in publishing. We don't know anything about
yeah.
publishing.
So
We don't know
yeah,
anything about bringing a book to market. And that is really been our saving grace. Because if you had us in another publishing house, they would say, are you too crazy? We're not doing this. Move along.
yeah.
Right?
We
And
push,
that is the truth of it. But because we don't know, we're like, yeah, this sounds like a good idea. We should do it.
yeah, we push boundaries we don't know are there.
We don't even know that. It's
Yeah,
other people who say, wow, that's crazy. You guys did that. Because
but
we're
who
oblivious. We're
did
like,
I?
really? I thought everybody does this. But that's one of the, beauties of working here. And people like you meet us, and you immediately get it. You're just like, wow, this
Yeah.
this company is completely different to anyone we've ever worked with before. And that's because it's true.
No, but meeting with you, Sharuk, and your team, you got it. So when Joe and I spoke to you about the symbols and what we needed, we felt that the questions you asked, you so got what we were trying to achieve. It's working with companies like yourselves that make what
Mm. And
bring
that
what we
is,
do to the next level.
and that I don't want us to, make that smaller than it actually is, because Emma and I have been in a lot of meetings, and poor
Yeah.
Emma's been subjected to it, where I say no. We're not going to work with you because you are not aligned. You're not getting it. If you're not aligned with our values and what we're trying to achieve, then, poor Emma, some of them she really wanted to work with. And I said, no, Emma, they don't
And
understand
how right were
us.
you?
I was very right.
Yeah.
But, and that's really important. I really protect our energy and what we are trying to achieve fiercely, to the point where sometimes maybe I'm looked at upon as like, oh my god, like a bit of an ogre. But I think on the other side everybody would agree, wow, it's so good. I'm like their little defense and their protector. That what I think Sweet Cherry and Every Cherry are so precious and so different in the industry that I do protect and guard what we do.
Perfect, perfect. One more important question which everybody might be thinking right now about, is it costly? Like, how do you ensure the accessible books are affordable and widely available?
Are you friends with my accountant? Did he put you up to that question? So yes, it's super costly what we do. But what I want you to do is turn the back of the book for the books that we've made for Every Cherry and see the RRP price, and it's the exact same price as the books that we publish in Sweet Cherry. And that is intentional. Even though the books cost more to make and we did a lot more research and user testing with it, it's our job to make sure. Remember, that's core of who we are. It's about accessibility, and part of that was affordability, which we touched on right at the beginning. Is that we would not penalize a child for needing these books, for being special needs. So therefore, yes, sometimes we've had to take it on the chin. So another example of outside of Every Cherry where we've taken it on the chin is the QR code, the audio code. At the beginning of all the way up until 2024, that was not put into the profit and loss of each book. The reason is my boss was really adamant that that is really important to these children. So that cost sat outside, when we looked to see whether this book was profitable for us. And so when that was his biggest mistake doing that, because when I had to pitch this to him and he said something similar to you, I said, oh, but Abdul, you already did this before. I'm just following your model. And so he was like, oh, okay. So that's how we got it. But fortunately for us, it was a risk. And it's a risk that's paid off. So, you know, we're we're okay. We're not rich, but we're okay. We're keeping our head above water and making a super sustainable business. And I think, Emma will tell you as well, it's been received so well, and people want to partner with us, work with us, sell the books, champion us at every turn. So that in itself is brilliant.
Perfect, perfect. That sounds so good to me. And because you mentioned about the symbolized books, we would like to know more about the symbolized books and how did MRCC help you in the entire process?
They were useless, weren't they?
No.
Not really.
So the symbolized books, as Sanjee said, um, they are keywords represented by a small symbol or image of what that word represents. Like Sanjee said, home would be a picture of a house. And we have created our what's called our symbol set in-house. So that means that whenever we need a symbol or a keyword, our designers, usually it's been one designer that's worked on the majority of it. We have had two, but we mainly have one. She's created a whole symbol set with my guidance and the team's guidance and what we need and what we think the symbols look like. She's made amendments so that everything works within this publishing world of reading. So the symbols are designed specifically for reading and making sure that every book is as clear as possible. One thing Sanjee did say to me at the very beginning, I always remember it, was we were talking about um, the Jungle Book, and all of the symbols in the Jungle Book were animals, not people, and that created a whole question about how to create the books. But because we have our own designers, we can adapt the symbols to best suit us. But what we found is that takes a lot of time. So we have a relationship with yourselves at MRCC whereby you are trying to help us make our time more efficient, so that you are creating a software for us so as we can type in the words that we would need on that page in the format we need for that page, so that then the symbols will appear rather than our designers manually putting those symbols in, which can inevitably form errors. So for example, a designer may put a symbol slightly to the left of the word than the right. And again, we pick up on these things, but if we had a piece of software that could do that for us, it would make ourselves more time efficient. And that's what we're working with you guys on.
Mhm.
So you've helped us come up with different templates of how we can use them, of how sophisticated the English language is, and how that we need to think about those kind of things when we talk about symbols and communication. But really, we are collaborating together to make sure that we have the most efficient software so that we can create more of these books and make sure that more young people can read with symbols by heightening our time and our quality to make sure that everything is as good as it needs to be for the community that really need it.
Perfect. And how did MRCC, did they kind of give you some good suggestions, good thoughts, or did they help you in a better way?
Yes, they have definitely been helpful. We're still at quite an early stage whereby we have templates ready, we have the symbols ready. We feel that when we pitched our idea to you, you completely understood what we needed. You could see our goal, which is quite a unique one,
Yeah.
really. It's
But I think we shouldn't underplay it. We did speak to a lot of companies.
yes,
You
yeah,
know,
we did.
like we did speak to a lot of different companies, but the girls, so you and Joe, were quite specific about the fact that they work with you.
Yeah.
And the reason was,
Well, it was because, like Sanjee said, we did speak to lots of companies, but it was the questions you asked to get that end result, so that you understood exactly what you needed. You asked the questions that we wanted you to ask, but also went beyond that expectation, which showed that you really clearly understood what the software was needed, why it was needed, and who it was needed for. So that was been really helpful. And then obviously very efficient with weekly calls. You always update us. We have a really efficient way that we share information between the companies. Um, I would say it's been a very easy process that hopefully will create the software that we dreamt of. And hopefully we can put to use soon. But I think everything's ticking away, and I think we're really happy. I would say for me, I found since Every Cherry has launched that we've attended quite a lot of fairs, we've done quite a lot of conferences, and because Every Cherry is reaching that specialist or special needs community and community that find reading a struggle, they want more. So they want more of the different types of book, more symbolized books, more easier books, more stories for your senses books. And I'm like, yes, we do need that. Yes, we do need that. And I think the biggest challenge for me is I need reining in.
no, it's meeting the supply, meeting the
Meeting
demand.
the demand. That's what
Supply
it
and the
is.
demand is
Yeah.
where the challenge is going to be
Yeah.
for us for this particular list. Obviously, at Sweet Cherry, we have the Every Cherry list. We have a young adult imprint. We have various books, various lists that we have to do. But yeah, I think Every Cherry, we didn't anticipate it to be as successful as it
No.
is. And I think that's the challenge for us, is to try and keep up with this demand, but also run the rest of the business.
Yeah, and I think the other thing as well is the reason that Every Cherry is so successful is we have an amazing marketing and sales team. And the challenge is to get these books out to the people that need them and make sure that they know it exists.
Mm-hmm.
And we thought that was going to be one of our biggest challenges, but actually it's been amazing that so many people have heard of us. And that's all down to working together as a company and making sure that
Mm.
we all work together, everyone understands what we're trying to achieve, and that's been great to
That's what
achieve
we
that.
said about the passion of every single person working here, the buy-in and belief on every single book, be it Every Cherry or otherwise, is insane. Like, everybody champions each book as if they wrote it,
Yeah,
and that's what makes these books super successful.
yeah.
Great. Because you mentioned, okay, sorry, you're saying something, and you just.
No, I just said I don't know what you would say for Sweet Cherry.
Is to try and keep the balls all juggling.
Yeah,
As a publisher, that's definitely, it's about making sure you make conscious decisions that resonate with the audience you're trying to reach. And obviously you don't know the future, but I do. So I have, a few other things coming on behind, because you're only as good as the last imprint you launch. Uh, so, I'm really pleased that Emma and the imprint are doing really, really well, but I'm thinking about not just the next one, but the one after. So, being a constant market leader means you can't ever rest. And now that Every Cherry is successful, I kind of have to beat that success. So that's the next challenge, to see, what is Sweet Cherry going to come up with next? Which obviously I have, but it's my job to make it just as successful as Every Cherry. So that's definitely the challenge on my head.
Great, great. And even I'm curious to know, like, how do you attend these requests, like the um, unexpected demands, and like, so do you work with freelancers or agencies? How do you manage to meet those things?
Be really honest with you, we drop tools. That's what we do. So we have a list that is scheduled in, that we know maybe a year or two in advance, and everybody just works away at it. And this is our list that we're hoping will potentially sell when we get to publishing. However, occasionally a customer comes along, or someone from Every Cherry comes along and says, I want 10 of these books, or whatever it is. And then we drop tools. We literally down tools, and we pick up the one which basically has the money on it, and we all work together to make sure that gets to the customer as and when they need it. And then we pick up tools again and go on with what we were always doing before. So that's kind of our format.
yeah,
We always, because we want to be a commercial, you asked about the profit and loss earlier, because we want to remain a commercial business. Our sales and marketing team, as Emma says, are amazing, and they're all out there making sales. So we try and get to those sales and service the customers that they've sold to as soon as possible.
I also do think, like Sanjay said, we have the list, and it's about making sure. So one of the things I learned was making sure that we are really clear with what we are selling, and making sure that staying true to our roots is key for me,
Mm.
especially for Every Cherry. But then pushing those boundaries and finding more areas that you can go in. But that list is what is for me something that is the foundation, and then
Mm.
we can build on it. And
But I
like
think we
Sanjay
should
said,
talk about the list, because at the beginning, the list looked completely different to what it ended up.
yes, it did.
Because that's a really good
Yeah,
thing to talk about, because I feel like we're saying we're super successful, but actually that's not always the case. We Emma came up with a list, and we launched with a list.
yeah,
We immediately had to pivot, because we realized the things that were successful when we were presenting to customers was different to what we projected.
yeah,
And that is something that we're really good at, because we're small, we're able to be nimble and quickly pivot and change, and to make the list grow with what is commercially, required.
yeah. I think if we're going to head with accessibility, we need to be accessible in how we see our list
Exactly.
and make
So you
sure
can't have
that,
any egos here.
yeah,
We can't sit here and say we were right, the person is wrong, the customer's wrong. We immediately go, okay, you know, we need to change us. We always control the controllables, which is us.
yeah.
Perfect. And now, as we are moving towards the end of this session, so I will ask a very silly question. It would be like, where do you see Sweet Cherry or and Every Cherry in 10 years from now?
So, shall I answer yours? So, Sweet Cherry is going to be continuing to change the game, change the face of publishing as you know it, push boundaries. I obviously know the next 10 years, you'll be happy to know. So, I know some great stuff is coming from us. We're really proud of the team that we've got. We look forward to seeing them grow and change and move on to other companies. And we're going to get new team members who are going to add their own versions of what we want to happen. But we're really excited about the next 10 years. But for every cherry, the next 10 years looks like they don't exist. That's our ambition for every cherry.
I
We
do not like
don't.
this answer.
What we want is for every cherry to be the game changer in the industry, to be the first in the industry, to lead the way in the industry so that it no longer needs to be something special. My ideal ambition in the next 10 years with other publishing houses will take over and say, oh my God, this is something that is commercial that we should have been doing in the first place, and join us and create more books so that every cherry no longer needs to be an imprint. It's actually normal, everyday life and regular part of how every publisher publishes.
Awesome. Awesome. And now I'm going to ask you the last question of the session, and that would be, how likely will you recommend MRCC to anybody else?
Lightly.
No, that's very likely. You've
Yeah.
been very easy to work with, very efficient. You definitely share our vision and what we hope to achieve. Um, I found you to be very passionate about the company that you work for. You're very, what's the word, proactive but reliable. So I know that every week I will be meeting your team at 11 o'clock. You are never late. You will always have an agenda. You always know exactly what you want to achieve, and you have weekly targets that you meet. We try to make sure that we give you everything you need to meet those targets. But I would definitely say that I'm very impressed with your professionalism and your efficiency, and I feel like we're in good hands. Pat on the back to you.
Yay, well done you.
Well, well, thank you so much. Yeah. So, thank you so much for all those nice information and kind words. And now we have come to the end of this. You didn't have to mention this. Great. It's always lovely. It's always lovely to speak to both of you, and trust me, I always enjoy the conversation having. And hopefully, we'll meet again and see you in person in London, or maybe if you come to India, or maybe if you plan a trip to India.
Oh,
My-
brilliant. Yeah, if we do, we will definitely come visit. But Matali has been telling me actually how hot it is and with
Yeah.
the humidity, so maybe not now.
Yeah, we can't even handle this.
Not now, in winters, maybe in December or somewhere, Christmas time.
When they come to London, we should take them out for a meal.
Yeah, definitely.
Can we take you out for dinner?
Awesome. Yes, I will do that. Yes, I'll be the host. And I'll show you around the city and everywhere.
No, you when you come to London, we'll take you out for dinner.
Oh, okay. Oh, sure. Great, great. Well, thank you once again for joining us on this podcast session with us. And I'm sure, just like me, a lot of people who are hearing this must have learned a lot of new things and know about the accessibility and inclusivity in children's publication. Well, once again, thank you so much for your time, and I wish a great luck and a success to Sweet Cherry and Every Cherry in all the way.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you so much.